In the civil justice system, in some ways, there are several steps that a plaintiff has to get through in order to recover. First, they need a verdict in their favor, and then they actually need to recover their damages from the defendant. And that can be a challenge sometimes. 11 Alive's senior investigative reporter Rebecca Lindstrom takes a look at whether winning a judgment can lead to payment or real consequences.
It looks like a tornado hit this house.
The whole thing is just upsetting.
But Associate Baden and his wife Brooke say this damage wasn't a natural disaster. It was their contractor.
He took the money, destroyed the house, neglected the project, went on a run.
He is Rafael Cabral with NRC Roofing and Remodeling. The Abadens paid him $50,000 for the initial labor and materials to add another floor onto their new house. His crew came, prepped the project, and tore off the roof, but then never returned.
So we have a newborn baby, no house, paying mortgage and rent.
Cabral didn't even show up in court when the Abadens filed a civil lawsuit. And their attorney, Pat Dixon, says Cabral hasn't paid a dime on the $441,000 default judgment they won.
Judgment is only a sheet of paper. And so after you get the judgment, another case essentially starts.
Because it is up to the victim to spend more money to hire private investigators, subpoena banks, and pay deputies to try to collect.
A lot of people will just wait to get a judgment and wrap that judgment into the bankruptcy file.
For years, I have covered stories of judgments that call out bad contractors and fraudulent business deals. Like the Abadens, they are all still waiting to collect.
I was hopeful when we got the verdict. I thought that he was going to follow through and make payments and, but foolish me.
No one tracks the success rate of these lawsuits. So we did, spending nearly a week studying breach of contract cases like the Abadens filed here at the Gwinnett County Courthouse in 2023. 37% of the people who filed against another person or small business won or agreed to a settlement. But of those who received a judgment, we could only find 3 that had actually been paid. Most were still fighting to collect. And 2 years later, another 17% were still going through the process.
It is not working. It's not working at all.
Some cases stop before they start. A judge has no choice but to dismiss the case if the person being sued isn't notified. Dixon says they spent nearly $1,000 to find Cabral.
We've had process servers tell us that there's people that open the blinds and just won't come to the door.
So then why bother?
We, as a society, don't stand up to these folks. I think they're just going to continue to do this.
Is this Rafael Cabral? We briefly talked with a man named Rafael Cabral.
Hello?
Who advertises a roofing business. But as soon as we started asking questions about the Abadens...
So you did not do any roofing work?
He hung up.
Hello?
Twice. And my email went unanswered. What does justice look like for you?
He needs to be charged criminally.
The Abadens attorney agrees. They say police need more training on fraud and theft charges to look beyond the broken contract and see the crime. And Georgia needs a system that makes accountability and enforcement possible.
It's disheartening for me. It's sad. I don't even want to come and visit the house.
In Atlanta, Rebecca Lindstrom, 11 Alive News, investigates.
Rebecca Lindstrom joining us now in the studio. Rebecca, that's tough. To see that story, and as we were watching this in studio, you pointed out that home before the so-called renovations took place. Describe what condition it was in.
I mean, it was move-in ready. It was beautiful. You looked at the original pictures, and this family could have moved right into it, but they felt they wanted more space, so...
They wanted to have a baby, I think they said?
That's right. They ended up having that little girl. I think what's interesting is some people have watched the story and said, well, why wouldn't you have just purchased a bigger house? Or, all these other questions. And I'm kind of like, okay, yeah, maybe they made decisions we wouldn't have made, but you got to step back from it and be like, that's irrelevant here. They chose the path they went on, and then they got hosed.
They paid for work
so
that they
did not
say
happen.
it did not happen.
And they're kind of like, if you just took the $50,000 and ran, that would have been bad, but they still would have had their house intact. Instead, took the $50,000 and took the roof off their house and then ran, kind of leaving them with, I mean, at this point in time, through another series of decisions and trying to get other contractors to come in here and finish it up, it's just been left to the elements, and now it would have to be condemned.
Oh,
So they're now living with her family because they can't afford the mortgage. I mean, they're still paying a mortgage on this house that they cannot live in and then rent. So they've had to move in with family while they sort out their finances. I mean, they've hired an attorney to try to go through this process. They've lost the money that they've paid this contractor. So they're just trying to sort out all those finances to then figure out what do we do with the house next, while also still trying to keep it up to a code standard. You know, you saw the violations on their door. They're still having to keep the lawn mowed and, you know, everything secure so that it's not a nuisance to the neighbors. I mean, not as much of a nuisance.
The family obtained a judgment in their favor.
Yes.
As the attorney you interviewed there pointed out, and he said, a judgment is just a piece of paper. Then
Yeah.
you've got to go and actually collect. What's the holdup? Why is it so difficult?
Well, you know, I mean, I don't think a lot of people understand the civil court process. If you're a victim of a crime, you've got a prosecutor that's pretty much pushing that case forward. But when you're the one having to go to court and say, someone did this to me, this is a breach of contract, which is essentially what most of these cases end up being that we looked at, breach of contract. It's you against another person, another business, another entity. You had an agreement, the agreement wasn't fulfilled, and so now you're going to court. Everything is on you to do. And in reality, you know, most people, they don't know how to go through a court process. They've never had something like this happen to them before. So just because you get the judgment, now you've got to find out, does that person actually have any money? Do they have any assets? Do they have something that you can actually physically go after in order to get paid? And a lot of those individuals who are doing this intentionally, they know how to hide their assets. They know how to put them in other people's names so that, you know, it doesn't fall back on them easily to have to even be able to pay you when they've done something wrong.
In that piece, too, the attorney pointed out the challenges of just tracking down and serving defendants in cases like this. I couldn't help but notice that you seem to have tracked down somebody with, at the very least, the same name as the defendant in this case. If you could find that person,
But again,
what's going on?
Did I find that person?
True, yeah, and we're not, you know, as you pointed out,
Right.
the names match.
But there was no physical address for that person's business, so we couldn't go there. I could do a background report and find some addresses where I think they live. And as an individual, if I were the one trying to collect on this, I would have to hire a server, usually like a sheriff's deputy, to go to each one of those addresses, knock on it, and try to identify if that's indeed where this person lived in order to have them served. And all they have to do, as you heard, is just not come to the door. And they don't have enough time to just sit there and stake out and wait for somebody to leave to then chase them down the street to try to hand them the papers. You know, that's where you start getting into the cost of private investigators to verify that that's where they live. And the costs just add up. And when you're already the victim of a financial crime, you begin to wonder, how much money can I put at fighting accountability? So it's like you want to do it because it's eating at you and you know this person should be held accountable, but you know, I mean, you're just throwing more money at the equation.
Rebecca, probably last question for you, but this is a topic that we could talk for a long time about. But has anybody raised any potential solutions, any ideas to make this system more efficient for those who a court has said have been wronged to recover?
Gosh, I sure wish they had. And I would love for someone to see this story and to have some solutions, or some lawmakers to want to tackle this, because a lot of our stories come from tips. But in this case, the story really sort of came from myself and the collection of tips and stories I've done over the years. Anecdotally, I knew people were having a tough time getting accountability in these civil cases. I wanted to know just how tough. And that's why we went through the process of going through every single breach of contract case the same year that the Abaddons filed and then tracking down all of those people, the outcomes of the cases of those that, were dismissed. Was it because they weren't served? Was it because they just lost? They didn't have enough factual evidence? Or did they win and they just couldn't get paid? And really, when you whittle down and you get to 3, it's a small number. And, I shouldn't give opinions, but my opinion is it's probably a number small enough that we should want to try to find some solutions.
Well, if anybody is going to stay on top of this and be thinking about ways to improve it, Rebecca, I know you and all the folks you talk to will be. Thank you for that important story.
Absolutely.